The Archer and Adaline by David Rose. We are Chapwin, and we champion suffering. What? I said. I was down on my knees and had to raise my head. I said we are Chapwin, the priest repeated, fondling his censer, and we give a Chapwin offering? Ah. I took to my feet, adjusting my sword and leaving the holy man to find another parishioner. I walked out of the church and back onto the cobblestones of Lirolette Avenue. Glow lamps and the waves of hanging tapestries almost hid me from the night, but soon I was under its early stars, lost again in thought. The Azadi Wars had been over for a decade, the years of peace ongoing for as long, yet I'd become conflict itself. Recent desperations had shown me it wasn't entirely uncomfortable reverting back to ways of life I'd abandoned. The church, its smells, its rhythmic chanting. They gave me sanctuary when I needed to contemplate where things had gone so wrong. I am a sex addict. That which is as simple as corking a bottle carries with it exhilarating heights and terrific depths of turbulent malice. Let me explain. All men carry a deep sense of love for tight, wet places. All men daydream about the tightening and slackening of cheeks that just walked past. It is solely men's insatiable drive to make love that has perpetuated our kind out of plagues, curses, and war. All men, from the time childhood ends to the grips of senility. This, however, does not make them like me. Recently, I've attempted to open up about my condition to those who'd listen. I am assured all men feel as I do, often relating my obsession to a fat man's lust for his plate. Such a pity. When the urge comes at you from across the ocean, yet you are still unable to dodge its wave. When the joyous trinkets of the day turn to rubble and ash, that's when you are beginning to understand enthrallment by an hourglass figure atop heart-crushing heels. Most nights I toss and turn in my bed. When the sun beat upon me in earlier days, I prowled about not much different than the mildly deranged predator. Any who prohibited me from sating my lust were thrown to the wayside, regardless of reprisal. Understanding where I developed an addiction to women required enough soul-searching to waste 2 lifetimes. I recall an original dislike for the fairer sex. Like the rest of the young scamps, I had once teased the girls who frolicked beside us. My interest only lay so far in lighting their hair on fire or proudly turning my back as they approached one of our scrap-kneed huddles. My mother's parents had come from the southern fields. When they moved to Pelliule, they brought with them their Chapwin credenda. That in mind, one night my family carried me off to attend the garnishing of spring. Barely old enough to lock in stern memory, the night seems now a fogged dance half merged in fairyland. Yet, beyond the perfumes and spastic writhing, I remember clearly, under the glow of church lamps, the fair-haired thing that watched me. She tiptoed, avoiding all the chanting, flailing grown-ups, making her way eventually to the front of my family's pew. I recall a sense of embarrassment when she handed me the Natillium. While my family towered above us, roaring their agreements and oaths to the priest at the altar, I twisted the flower by its stalk, absently watching the spin of the petals' whites and yellow. I laughed so hard, remembering it, that my stomach hurts. With a sudden pounce, I rained down punches on the poor little girl. Her squeals became a world away when I was yanked skyward by my collar, then marched out by my grandfather. As the rest of my family toppled over themselves, apologizing to the girl's parents, the Zevon patriarch took me to a dark patch under the trees. As he died soon after, I remember little about him, other than the strength in his wood-cutting arms that had remained long into his elder years. "Arcus!" I'd later heard, screeched from what seemed its own eternity. I sat scolded in a corner, pout-faced and numb from the tirades of relatives, each taking their turn declaring the exact level of disgrace I'd brought upon the house of Zevon. I didn't understand why I'd done what I had. My reaction to the damn flower, the squeamish fluttering of the unfamiliar. But I had done it. A peculiar memory to retell, I know, and even now I do so in the vain attempt to persuade myself that my issues didn't originate from weakness, but sprang up from some primeval, manly aggression. That singular event, though, I'm afraid, does nothing more than merely point to boyhood itself, just one of the many acts boys conjure up that lead to gray hair atop a parent's exacerbated brow. No, The first clear sign that my troubles were beginning came when boyish fantasies of dragon slaying gave way to new dreams, dreams of another kind. I had a warrior soul from the beginning. The fistfights on the shores of Lake Oraga had once made the name Arcus synonymous with speckling the rich soil red. Days spent tackling cohorts in games of divich ball, and the bruised victories celebrated whilst limping home are fond memories still. Lamentably, puberty had a different plan. As my pudgy friends became barrel-chested men, and the boys whose baby teeth I had once knocked out were beginning to sprout the preludes of beards, I remained in appearance that of a child. Before I could truly say why, my place in the hierarchy of maleness steadily diminished. Eons later, after I had been forced to hide my hairless endowments from the eyes of my peers, I began to take shape, although not how I had hoped. My mother was sure to tell me regularly how I was growing like a weed, and in one way she was right. In a summer I shot 2 full hands in the air, just without the benefit of a single added pound of flesh. And that was my lingering fate, a skinny, twerpish lad. Worse yet, I still thrummed with my fighter's blood. Although a new anger had formed, that of being the target of jokes and bullies, rage alone is never enough to avoid being pinned and pummeled. The school I attended was like many schools in Parilgotheum. Poorer children, destined to carry the spear and the shovel, filtered past polished wagons dropping off their polished brats. I have been told other cities in Relaya follow the olden ways. The child of a bank clerk would never mingle with the jeweled child of that bank's owner. But Parilgotheum had long ago done away with sound segregations in exchange for a sense of progressive smug. I mention school because, while I was supposed to be studying the beads of an abacus, I tortured myself, I suppose, by the relentless study of my shapely classmates. Pleasuring myself would spend my angst before school, and a shameful encore would commence shortly after I'd returned to fling down my books. As often the case, in time most families sharing our neighborhood prospered or horrendously failed. The result? My cohorts were moved into shanties or homes of polished pink ivory, disappearing from my eyes as if they'd been zapped by a wizard into the ether. One friend remained. Worse to my plight than any wizard, his sanctimonious parents, he eventually learned, and I was immediately told, practiced sexual liberties by way of some secret gathering. Although he said this gathering touted a rule-free existence, I abandoned my pleas to join when his interrogated father sheepishly confessed to their furtive joys and rolled out the cult's rigid requirements. A petitioner had to have not 1, but 4 sponsors. The only people I knew were the types who chanted hymns and tithed on the appointed day. If my work in military reconnaissance had a telling prequel, surely then it was this night. After exhausting every ploy imaginable, after trailing behind their hastening pace to the flower-streamed doorway of their lair, I could only stare at a sullen wall, enviously fantasizing from the shadows what loin-frothed ecstasy transpired on the other side. At one gathering, wouldn't you know it, my friend was eventually inducted. This didn't help my jealousy any, making it so great in fact it soon blotted out all conscious thought. Later I experienced a sigh of relief, then guilt, for the joy that I had not been him. An eager member of Ansel's True had sabotaged the sex cult. The Chaplainite purposefully contracted Thena's poxy, the street name of our province's most insidious venereal disease. After letting the pustules fade and the discharge ripen to prime lethality, in the company of duped sponsors, the bright smiling zealot walked to the same route I had. Then through the flower-streamed doorway, he penetrated into enemy grounds and shucked off his robe. Half a year later, most members had withered to gaunt mimics of their former selves, my friend being no exception. Such tragedies, however, are forgotten when the moral compelling them is one we are too young or too weak to embrace. The last of my school days left me still yearning for the touch of women like the thirst of a maroon sailor. At perhaps the most thirst-ridden, I was en route from one class to another when there appeared in front of me a girl whom I'd known from our days as children. Fate had transformed her lank, boyish frame into strutting elegance itself. I walked behind this creature, one who long ago had forgotten I'd existed. Dressed for fairer lads, her heels supported lean, long, muscular legs, olive from her deliberate appointments with the sun. Her skirt was cruelly short. Her undergarments fit snug as shadows. I learned this latter torture as I walked straight into a wall. My ego bruised, my nose bleeding, my soul crumpled. She sailed around the bend without so much as a glance at what dunce had just caused the mirthful riot. Looking around at those who clapped my back or roared in my face, I knew right then that what I desired most was to be gorged on by these other men. Left me the hope to learn the pleasures of women, but happiness, peace, fulfillment, all worthless when in the mind's eye of the smirking, hopeless addict. This, I must submit, is the chief similarity I've witnessed when braving talks with the pipeheads or an alley drunkard. For us, the addict, our need isn't necessarily merely like life itself, but is life itself. We who were made cosmically unwhole. After too many memories of longing, after years had passed, my emptiness had grown teeth. In some dark place deep inside, an always open mouth screamed its hunger, its insatiability, and its demand to be fed. No, I did not become a rapist, blast you, if that's where you thought I was going. No. Chalk one up for the Chaplin upbringing, if nothing else. I feared hellfire in my moments of unspeakable contemplation. Religion, I am even prouder to say, was not what saved me, but my aforementioned fighter's blood. This I was soon to learn.